My nieces tried to push me into the pool for a prank, but they fell in instead. Now, their parents are demanding I apologize and pay for their ruined phone. Original post. OOP reluctantly goes to a family barbecue. OOP's nephews and nieces push people into the pool and eventually try with OOP. OOP sees this coming from a mile away and steps out of the way, and the kids fall in, along with the phone they were holding to record. OOP's sisters got pissed for almost letting their kids drown, and because the phone is now at the bottom of the pool. They insist that OOP should have let the kids push him into the pool and OOP needs to apologize. OOP is voted NTA update post. OOP spends the first part of this post explaining that the kids were fully capable of swimming and that the party ended on a sour note. Turns out drunk BL who faceplanted had to get stitches. Sisters and Bills texted mean shit to OOP and he and his wife blocked them. Mom and Dad were pissed at the texts and made the sisters apologize and end this nonsense. OOP thought things were over but instead gets a text from one Bill saying OOP needs to reimburse them for the phone. OOP refuses, sends a screenshot to his parents, and says he's going no contact with sisters. In what OOP says is an out-of-character move, Dad calls sisters and rips them a new one. Grandkids are no longer welcome at their place indefinitely, which messes up the free babysitting Mom provides. They are banned from the vacation house, and he tells them that OOP owns that vacation house, not the parents. Sisters freak out. Sisters and husbands come over unannounced to apologize a few days later. OOP and wife are out at dinner, so they leave a note. OOP decides no contact is the best option for now. Update 2. Well, it's been an interesting last few days. I thought the shit had hit the fan before, but it was more of a fart compared to what's happened this week. TLDR. OOP provides financial context here. OOP's sisters think parents are dripping in money when in fact they are not. Turns out oldest sis and her fam have been living beyond their means and are in need of a loan, which parents can't give. She's also been renting out the vacation house once a month or so for the last 3 years and has been keeping the money. Another sister was aware of this and possibly has rented it out previously as well. OOP's parents feel awful and let OOP know. They figure that the sisters will try to convince OOP to let them rent out the house. Turns out they're right. The sisters show up and practically force their way inside OOP's house to convince them to let them use the place. They also say, quoting from OOP here, "I've been a shitty brother and that I needed to step up and plan on paying for their kids' college tuition since that's what family does." OOP calls them out on their bullshit, and there's a huge blow-up and the sisters leave. OOP is exhausted, frustrated and drained. Update 3. TLDR. OOP's parents decide they're done managing the vacation home, keeping track of who was using it, routine maintenance, etc., because sisters keep pressuring them to use it. OOP feels bad for his parents because he wanted them to be able to use it regularly and now dynamics have changed, but he gets it. OOP locks the gate with a heavy-duty chain and lock, resets all keypads and creates new codes, gets security cameras and has signs put up saying the area is monitored by video. OOP gets a call from both husbands trying to convince him to let them use the house, like they always have. The older BL tried to go up with some friends but couldn't get in. He threatens on the phone to basically break in and acts completely entitled. Other BL sounds like he is being made to call by sister. OOP obviously says no and considers selling the home. He also has no plans to initiate contact with sisters and they are not talking with him. Update 4. TLDR. OOP hires a guy to manage, look after the vacation home. Parents are continually pressured by sisters to tell OOP to open up the vacation home for Thanksgiving. They refused and instead said they would organize a gathering at an Airbnb if everyone split the cost, otherwise they would host at their place. This causes an argument because the middle sister is for Airbnb, and the oldest sister doesn't have any money. So Thanksgiving will be at my parents' house, but OOP and wife won't be there. Parents ask OOP to not sell for now as they would like to still use the place, but won't until sisters have come to terms with the new normal. Wife and OOP have stayed no contact with sisters, but they have called and left messages. OOP says F you Google Voice, demanding OOP meets with them and work out how everyone can use the family vacation home. OOP doesn't respond. OOP also does not plan to turn the vacation home into an Airbnb. This part is directly from the post. My parents tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are getting out of the leases for their SUV and big-ass truck and are selling their jet skis and some other shit they've never needed. That's going to be really hard on her. She's quite the braggart and won't like being seen in something older, smaller, cheaper. My Beal's identity is very much wrapped up with his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the truck company's logo. which frankly is one of the many reasons why he and I never hung out. Update 5. Things have gone to hell. I really, truly did not think anything like this would happen. Short version, my brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and were arrested. They've been charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and communicating threats, all Class 1 misdemeanors. I've refused to drop the charges. I might do so if I'm fully paid for the damage they caused. They were still in jail as of Saturday evening. I assume they're out by now. Editor's note, my TLDR of the next part of the post. Beals went to the vacation home and cut through the chain, damaged the gate. They messed up the front door trying to get in, ended up getting through another door, and then broke into the barn. David, the guy OOP hired to manage the home, called the cops. Cops didn't buy Beals' excuses that they were allowed, and OOP was unreachable at the moment due to spending the day with his wife's family and leaving the phones in the car. Beals were booked at the sheriff's office. Sisters freaked out, but OOP had them blocked. Older sister couldn't afford bail because their cards were maxed out, so middle sis would have to pay for everything. OOP and his wife checked their phones late on Friday on their way home and found that mom and dad, the sheriff's department, and David had all called. OOP called David when he got home and found out the extent of the damage. He ended Friday, calling the sheriff's department and telling them it wasn't a misunderstanding and that Beals did not have his permission to be there. From OOP's post, I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my folks. They were both pretty rattled about it all, my mom in particular. My sisters had browbeat them into telling me I should tell the cops it was all a mistake and that I wanted the charges dropped. I refused flat out, told them there was no way I'd do that until I spoke with an attorney, and also not until I was paid in full for whatever it will cost to fix everything 100%. My mom was crying hard by the time we got off the phone, which of course made me feel like shit. My dad suggested it was time for a complete start over, but also said he thought they needed to pay for the damage. I haven't gone up to the property yet, there's nothing I can do, and I'll probably go nuts when I see the damage in person. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping for tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job isn't one I can just wander off from for non-emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorney friends asking them to recommend the right lawyers to go after my sisters and BILs. I don't know what I can do exactly, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I have all the texts they've sent me, that might help. I'm strongly considering suing them for the money they made renting the place. I don't care about the cash, but it will help make them as miserable as possible. The gloves are definitely off at this point. A couple of side notes. BILs had no idea I'd hired someone to keep an eye on things, or that there are cameras there now. My parents knew but hadn't told them, because they knew it would just give my sisters a reason to drama up. There are signs on the property stating it's being monitored with cameras, and no trespassing signs though. My wife has completely had it at this point. I don't blame her, she's been more than patient about it all, but she reached her limit and was not shy about letting me know. She told me it's up to me how I deal with this, but that she thought they all needed to be taught a hard lesson. Older BIL likely won't face any repercussions at his job over this, but middle BIL has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that will be motivation for middle BIL to pay for the damages himself immediately. David, the caretaker, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies, figured it was because they were all locals. I was wrong, he was a cop in a big city for years, was shot on duty, and afterwards decided to quit and move to where his parents had retired. He has some PTSD over it all. His dog is a certified service animal and is usually with him. I know law enforcement people tend to hang together, I guess that's how they became his friend group. I don't want to see or speak with these a-holes for the rest of my life. I know this is in direct conflict with my overwhelming urge to make their lives as miserable as possible. Update 6. Didn't think I'd be doing another post this soon, but a lot has happened over the past 2 days. Short version, I think the corner has been turned on this crap. Thursday afternoon, I got a courier-delivered envelope at my office. In it was a signed letter from both my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter, they made what I have to say was a really sincere apology. Among other things, they acknowledged breaking in, acknowledged it was wrong, said the $5,000 was to pay for the damage and that they'd pay more if it cost more than that. Also said they'd stay away from the vacation home unless my wife and I specifically invited them. They also asked that I do what I could to get the charges dropped as soon as possible because they both could lose their jobs, and that they'd agree to a restraining order or whatever else it took for that to happen. There was more as well, all conciliatory, but that's the gist of it. To say this was a shock is an understatement. It was, obviously, a total 180 from their past behavior. I'd already made an appointment with an attorney to see about suing my BILs over the damage and to try to get a restraining order. I called him and told him what I'd just received, and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day instead of next week. Told me not to deposit the check. We met for about 2 hours. He ended up recommending the wife and I do a settlement and mutual release agreement with all 4 of them, sisters, and BILs. He said if we went after them via a lawsuit that we'd almost certainly win, but that it could take 2 years or more, there would be sizable upfront legal fees, and that we might never see any money. He also said we could keep the $5,000 free and clear even if we didn't let them off the hook. He's drawing up the agreement. It won't be ready until Monday. The agreement will include what's essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order. I'd already asked my property manager to work up a bid to get the damage repaired. I called him after the meeting and asked that he get me as close to an estimate as possible ASAP. Got that Friday. He thinks it will take around $4,000 to everything. Most of that is for the front door. On Friday, my attorney contacted each of the BILs, told them what we were proposing, and advised them to get their own lawyers. They both agreed to it. The middle bill told him they could afford to either pay for the damages or pay for a lawyer, but not both, and they figured a lawyer wouldn't make any difference given that they really had no defense for what they did. His biggest concern was if the charges could be dropped. From what I can tell, they're willing to do anything, sign anything to make this all go away. My attorney also called the DA's office on Friday to discuss dismissing the charges, got the name of the prosecutor and left them a message but has not spoken to them yet. He thinks they'll dismiss the charges because the bills are paying up and they have no priors, but then again, he's not a criminal lawyer. Also said I should be prepared to drive up there Monday or Tuesday and tell the prosecutor in person that I want everything dismissed. He's also advised me to continue to be no contact with sisters and BILs especially for the next 6 months, and that it will be really important to follow the terms of the agreement when it comes to future interactions with them. I'm guessing that the BIL's change of heart is due to them having figured out what's at stake for them, what it's going to cost them in legal fees and fines and so on. There's also the highly unlikely possibility that they could go to jail for up to 120 days, and as I've mentioned, one of them has a security clearance for his job that could be at risk. So this is their Hail Mary pass to keep their normal lives. This isn't a perfect resolution to the situation, but at least it will get me past the legal and financial parts of the shit show that I've been in for the past few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them ever again, and that's fine. What I want most at this point is to close this off, get on with my life, and never speak to any of them again. I'm exhausted from this. Wife feels pretty much the same way. Kind of a side issue, but getting the written apology was, weirdly, a huge moment for me. I wasn't expecting that ever, but apparently it matters to me quite a bit. The money doesn't feel particularly important at this moment. I'll damn sure take it though. Also, I'm pretty certain my middle sister and her husband came up with the money. The cashier's check is from the credit union of the company he works for. Once things are signed, I plan to make one more update, probably just an edit to this post. I'm sorry for being so pedantic. Writing these posts has helped clear my head and the feedback has really helped. I truly appreciate everyone's comments, insights, and support. And I really, really hope none of you ever have to go through this kind of nonsense. Update 7, Tuesday morning, I met with my attorney and went over the agreement. Changed a couple of minor things, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law. It included a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee, about $3,000. They weren't happy about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he told them they either accept it as is or there would be no deal at all and we'd proceed with suing them for the money they got from renting out the place, wear and tear from renting it, repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could. He also told them I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. Short version, they came in and signed. I wasn't there. I'm told it was a pretty tense environment, that the middle deal appeared to have taken charge and that at one point he told both of my sisters to shut the hell up or he was walking away from the whole thing, making his own deal with us and the rest of them could all go to hell. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claiming that's all they had. It's close enough that we're going to accept it as the final payment. Attorney also told me that everyone was very cold and curt towards one another, but that they all managed to keep it together long enough to sign and left without making too big of a scene. I drove up to the vacation house early yesterday to check out the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so senseless. I was so pissed that I was ready to eat the cost of repairs and do everything I could to ruin their lives. Tried walking it off, failed utterly. Ended up calling a good friend who was kind enough to stay on the phone for over an hour, letting me spew and vent. He eventually got me back to focusing on the bigger picture of putting this behind me and getting on with my life. Honestly, I'm still not sure that's what I want to do, but I settled down enough to get some food in me, and I felt better. After lunch, I went to the DA's office, hadn't made an appointment and had to wait a while but got to meet with the assistant DA who's got the case. Short version is that since I don't want to prosecute and the BILs have already paid for the damages, that they are willing to drop all the charges except trespassing, which in this case will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. The BILs will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the judge sets. I'm also told that if they fight the trespassing charge or ever so much as fart in public up there, that it would go very poorly for them. It helped that the BILs didn't resist arrest. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went by the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so quickly and everything. Wanted to thank the deputies personally, but only spoke to the dispatch person. And I tried to meet up with David, the property manager, but couldn't get hold of him. A couple of notes: the agreement includes a no-contact clause. Basically, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or the other way around, whoever got there last has to leave immediately. No contact except through attorneys or other mutually agreed third parties. They get to keep whatever they made from renting the vacation house, my big give, unless I have tax consequences, which they will be responsible for. And we release each other from all other liabilities up through the present. There's more to it than that, but those are the high points. Wife and I will sign the agreement later today. After that, I can't talk about most of this, but I can talk around it. I think this is my final update regarding all this nonsense, but I'll respond to comments if I can. As I've said before, posting about all of this and reading folks' thoughts and responses has been really helpful and has probably been key in my being able to handle this in a relatively healthy way. So thank you all again. Update 8, thought it would be worth an update for anyone who's interested. Unsurprisingly, my oldest sister and brother-in-law have filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. While I don't care about what happens to them financially or otherwise, they've also managed to drag my parents into their mess, which I'm not happy about. At the start of the year, my BIL's oversized customized Pride and Joy truck was repossessed. Pretty embarrassing for him, I'm sure. Happened at work. This was their breaking point. Without the truck, they have to share a Kia my parents loaned them, and they can barely fit in it with their 3 kids. Financially, they're effed. They owe at least $125,000, probably more, on high-interest credit cards. They have zero equity in their house, and have a couple of personal loans that I'm pretty certain they got under false pretenses. They have loans on their ATVs and trailers. They also owe a chunk of money from defaulting on the truck lease. They hadn't made any payments on their credit cards or loans in months and were behind on their house payments as well. They got out of the lease on my sister's massive SUV late last year. They were upside down on it as well, so had to come up with cash to do so. They also had to pay an attorney, the fine and court costs for my BIL's trespassing charge at the vacation house. And they owe my middle sister and her husband money for bail and their portion of damages to the place. As I've mentioned before, my folks have never been financial wizards, but they have at least been generally responsible. They're retired, their home is paid off, and they live off of Social Security and pensions. Altogether, they get more than they spend. Minimal savings, just an emergency fund. Turns out my folks emptied out that fund, cashed out their small IRA, $20,000, and gave it to my sister. That let her catch up on the house payment and cover the negative equity on her car lease. But now, literally every bit of savings my parents possessed is gone. Plus, my parents have been paying for their groceries for several months and continue to pay the insurance on the car they loaned my sister. According to my dad, my sisters worked my mom for weeks to get her to fork over the money. They'd worked on both my folks at the same time for a while, but my dad flat out refused every time. Eventually, Mom caved. She was worried that my sister would have to move to a hovel in some backwater town and that the kids would be barefoot and eating dirt. Dad's not happy about it, and to say there's some tension between them right now is an understatement. But they'll be fine. I was pretty disappointed when my parents told me all this, but I wasn't surprised. It sucks that they emptied out their savings to help, but I kind of get it. The way the bankruptcy laws are in our state, by getting caught up on the home loan, my sister should be able to keep the house. I tried hard not to say how I felt about this, and my sisters mostly succeeded. Really, I'm way more pissed about this than I should be. The worst part for me is that my sister and BIL could now contact me and my wife without any real fear of repercussions. The only penalty the no-contact agreement has is that if they violate it, we can go after them for the money they made from renting out the vacation house and related damages. Since they've filed for bankruptcy, that's now not an impediment for them. I'm hoping they'll leave us alone, but who knows? Folks also told me that my middle sister and her husband have hit a rough spot, and that he's not currently living with her and the kids. Just to guess, but I imagine he's had it with the whole family dynamic that caused this nonsense. Not directly related, but on a brighter note, I've spent 2 weekends at the mountain house since the start of the year, once with my wife and once alone. Both times there was a lot of snow. It was incredibly beautiful and relaxing. Very therapeutic. The place also has good internet service now, thanks Starlink, which is nice. Plus knowing that I can count on David, the property manager, to keep the place in shape. Ready for us to visit and to help if we get snowed in eliminates most of the stress in owning it. My folks have used it a few times as well and get along great with David. Relevant comments. Could you get a restraining order? If they start up again, I do indeed plan to get a restraining order. In fact, my wife made it clear to me she expects a very hard approach to any BS from them going forward, which I agree with, of course. I had the security cameras at our house upgraded at the start of the year, just in case they come by. I also kept all their previous texts and provided screenshots to my attorney for safekeeping. If they cause any trouble at the vacation house, they're toast. The sheriff's department and DA's office have the full story and are sympathetic to our situation. $125,000 on credit cards? $125,000 is my estimate based on my sister telling my parents they were racking up at least $3,000 per month just in credit card interest. She thought it might be more. Their credit was already crap before the bankruptcy, so I'm guessing they might be paying as high as 28% interest. If so, they'd owe about $125,000. If they're paying a lower interest rate, the principal would be higher. But yeah, it's an absurd amount, and that $3,000 doesn't include all the other interest they're paying. And of course there's the principal that just sits there. On the other hand, I'm told they had a great time going to Disney World for a week, so there's that. Middle Bill. Younger Bill seems to be more decent than I've given him credit for in the past. I'll admit to a bit of myopia. For years I've seen the four of them and their kids as just one mass of inconvenient people I have nothing in common with but can't avoid. But he seems to have hit his limit and made some changes. Hope it works out for him and that he pulls my sister in the right direction. How sisters got so entitled, my sisters, and I, weren't raised to be like they are. When I was young, they weren't any more self-entitled than any other teenagers. We all worked crappy teenage jobs, didn't get spoiled, it was really a very standard suburban upbringing. We weren't super close, but we weren't enemies. Somewhere along the line after going off to college, they changed for the worse. I guess it could be worse, they could have become drug addicts or militant vegan volcano worshippers or whatever. But they sure became people I don't want to be around. And yes, the pool incident was the spark for the meltdown, but the fuel had been accumulating for years. It would have come out at some point that she was renting the house out on the sly and things would have gone to hell then just like they did now. Update 9. There's been a fair number of requests for an update, and considering it's coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the pool incident, I thought I'd post one. My folks worked through Mom, giving my oldest sister her IRA and their emergency fund. Altogether Mom gave her $45,000. According to Dad, once Mom realized how much she'd been manipulated, she got as mad and upset as he'd ever seen her. I think she had a moment of clarity. She and Dad ended up calling my sisters on a 3-way call, and according to Dad, it went south pretty quickly. Sisters were gaslighting them, Mom lost her cool and ended up ripping into them hard, there were lots of tears, and eventually both sisters hung up. Mom really just wanted both sisters to acknowledge that they'd put her and Dad in a risky financial situation. Typical blow-up, I guess, but not the kind of thing that happens in our family. The next morning, my dad called my older sister and told her he'd be picking up the car they'd loaned her. She tried to argue, but he told her it wasn't up for discussion. He got a neighbor friend to take him to her house as soon as he hung up and drove it home without talking to her. Sister called and went off on him, said lots of nasty stuff, which of course hurt him. But at least they have the car back. Dad also told me something that left me dumbfounded. For the last 17 years, they were giving both sisters a grocery allowance that was up to $500 per month. What the effing EFF? I thought I had a pretty good handle on where their money was going, but clearly I was wrong. This started back when I was going to graduate school and living at home. My sisters asked for the money because they thought it wasn't fair that I was living at home rent-free, and then it just never ended. In any case, my parents cut them off. Unsurprisingly, my sisters weren't happy about it. Who the hell gets an allowance from their parents when they're in their 40s? Because of all this, my folks and sisters quit talking for a while. Don't know if they've resolved everything, but they appear to be on speaking terms again, though my folks aren't having them or the kids over. I'm in don't ask mode, it's their business. My folks are using the vacation home fairly regularly. Currently they're there for a 2-week stay and will probably make it 3. Unfortunately, my wife and I haven't spent any time there lately other than me having made a couple of day trips to check on it and drop off some supplies. The property manager I hired, David, is still taking good care of the place. Side note, middle sister told my mom that oldest sister had been making over $6,000 per month renting the house out and that it had been going on for nearly 3 years. Pretty certain she didn't declare the income, so that's like grossing $8,000 to $9,000 per month. I will forever find that galling. Oldest sister and BIL still have their house. My attorney checked up on their bankruptcy case. The court converted it from Chapter 7 to Chapter 13, which I believe means they have to pay back a lot more of their debts. Middle sister and her husband are still separated. I don't know if my middle Bill has had any issues with his security clearance because of breaking into the house. I do know he's still with the same big defense company. At my parents' request, I've been working on putting their house into a trust. They want me to manage their affairs as they get older and keep the house safe from my sisters. I'm working with an attorney, but it's not done yet. Folks have asked me to be the trustee and have also given me full power of attorney. The best part about the last few months is that my sisters, BILs, have left us alone and have stayed away from the vacation home. Wife and I are really happy to be back to our normal lives. Hope everyone else's lives are going great. Update 10, December 14, 2024. Some folks have asked for an update. Here you go. In August, my attorney let me know he'd received a letter for me from my middle brother-in-law. This was the first contact from any of my sisters or their husbands since they'd been arrested. It was a long letter, had a sincere apology, and a lot of information he thought I should know. Biggest thing was that he and my sister are divorced, not separated. He moved out and filed for divorce right after we made the settlement agreement. He and my middle sister kept it quiet until it was done. Their house sold in June and she's moved to an apartment. He told me that his being arrested last year, along with my other BIL, for breaking into the vacation house could have cost him his job and killed his career, and that it was a huge moment of clarity. He said that between the 4 of them, my sisters, him and my oldest sister's husband, had become totally toxic, that they are all borderline alcoholics or worse, and that he had to get away from that environment. He no longer speaks to my oldest sister or her husband. He also asked if he, my dad, and I could meet and have an extended conversation as there were things he needed to talk about in person. Frankly, I was unenthused, but my wife thought it was worth doing. I asked my dad if he was interested. He was, so I relayed a response to now ex-BIL through my attorney and we met over lunch. We talked for over 2 hours. It was pretty exhausting. Ex-BIL looked better than I'd seen him in, well, forever. He's quit drinking, is in therapy, has lost a lot of weight and looked fit. He was apologetic about all the BS he'd been involved in and apologized to my dad for hiding the divorce. Told us therapy is really helping him. Asked me if the $5,000 he'd sent covered all the damage to the vacation house. I told him it had, and thanked me for talking to the county prosecutor. Said he is strongly considering transferring to a new project that would have him living overseas for the next few years, that he really needed to reset his life, but he was trying to balance his mental health against not being part of his kids' lives every day. Ex-BIL also hit us with what for me was quite the WTF. Apparently, my sisters have hated me since before I was born, but have always hidden it from the rest of us. They like things better when there were just the 2 of them. He said when they drank, which was whenever they were together, my sisters would often bitch about me being the favorite child, how my folks gave me more opportunities than they had, how my doing well was a result of that, and that I didn't deserve my success. None of that made any sense to me or my dad. All 3 of us went to the same public schools, had dumb part-time jobs, etc. My folks paid for 100% of their college, not mine. I got a full scholarship. I was pretty shocked by this, but my dad was literally speechless. Dad eventually said he had no clue they felt that way as kids, and that he and Mom had never favored any of us. He's still having a hard time with this. Personally, I'm embarrassed that I was clueless about it all my life. But it does explain a lot. Ex-BIL warned us that my sisters and remaining BIL intended to put on a full court press to alienate my folks from my wife and me. They also planned to keep the grandkids away from my folks to pressure them. He said that they're still 1000% convinced that my folks are sitting on a ton of money, they want some of it ASAP, and are sure I'd stop my folks from giving them anything. That got a laugh out of my dad, because he and Mom simply don't have any real money. They do have their house, of course. XBIL also told us that he and my middle sister had rented out the vacation house a total of 6 times over the years. He offered to pay me what they'd made, I declined and told him it was in the past. He also told us my older sister BIL had never declared the income from renting out the vacation house. He didn't want to get in trouble with the IRS. Both my dad and I spoke with XBIL separately for a few minutes. Don't know what they talked about. I thanked him for his apology and for making things right financially. Also wished him well and told him I'd be willing to talk with him again down the road. Don't think that's going to happen. I probably could have been more forgiving, but I think he appreciated me not bullshitting him by acting like all this crap hasn't affected my wife and me. There was more, but it's less important and this is too long as it is. After XBIL left, I asked my dad if he, Mom and I could sit down and talk about all this. I didn't mean immediately, but that's how he took it. He called Mom and let her know I was coming over, so I rolled with it. She was pretty hurt by my sister's plans to ruin her and Dad's relationship with me and my wife and to use the grandkids as pawns. She cried a lot and wanted to confront them immediately. Dad got her to put a pin in that for a while. Mom was also dumbfounded about me supposedly being the favorite child. She feels like they were actually more strict with me because I had a hard curfew and my sisters didn't. To be honest, I barely remember that, it was 25 years ago. A couple of side notes, middle sister eventually told our folks she's divorced. She's currently living off child support and her half of the home sale. Supposedly she's trying to find a job. My parents have gone low contact with both sisters, no idea how permanent that is, but Mom seems like she's completely had it with them for the foreseeable future. They're spending a lot of time at the vacation house, we're up there over a month at one point. Bill found my Reddit posts, he's not terribly happy about them but feels they're more or less accurate, though obviously he found them slanted towards my point of view. He disagreed that he's boring, but said to be fair, that he finds me boring as well. I can live with that, our worlds don't have much overlap except my sister. We got the trust set up for my parents' house, I'm the trustee? All this has been emotionally draining for me. I decided it would be a good idea for me to see a therapist again. I've seen one in the past, mainly for stress-related issues. I've been doing so for a while and it's definitely helpful. Therapist tells me my decision to stay no contact with my siblings is healthy for now, but also wants me to keep an open mind down the road.